Hi guys, and welcome back to another session with the Tattoo Business Doc. I'm Dr. Justin Buerta, and today we're talking about VAT and the new threshold of 2.3 million Rand compared to what it was at a million. Now, most people or most of my smaller clients have been asking, but okay, should we not, what should we do? And I'll tell you what we should do is you should consider the commercial impact on your business. Now, if you're a hairdresser or a person that washes dogs or something in that line where services are provided, then I would suggest, if you do under 2.3 million, to consider letting go of the being VAT registered. But even then, like myself, I provide services to companies and we invoice with VAT so that those clients can claim the VAT. Now, most of my expense is literally salaries and wages. I've got rent, I've got stationery, I've got telephones, I've got this, I've got that. But the majority of my expense is staff. It's their salaries. It's qualified people, so they don't come cheap. And I don't come cheap either. So, there is always commercial consequences you've got to think about. Then there's also tax consequences. So many people, when they are clever and they think they know what was said and how to do it and everything else, because people have come back to me and said, let's do, turnover taxation because it replaces VAT and this, that, and next thing. And I'm like, yeah, but if you make a loss, unfortunately, you're still going to be paying tax because it's turnover based and not profit and loss based. So that's also not clever because then you lose the ability to claim your assessed losses when you do make profits. And sometimes, when you have to pay taxes, you're going to still have to pay tax because now you don't have the benefit thereof. And the same with actually stopping being a VAT registered vendor. And the first thing you need to consider is, what is your growth path? Are you going to stay under the 2.3 or are you going to exceed it? Now, I can tell you now, with the cost of living, everything else, companies that do below 2 million Rand, those guys are barely working. They're really barely working. They probably have one or two sources of income and they plot around and they're not really actually doing that much. Then, yes, I can say 2.3. Yeah, okay. Now, a person needs to understand, once you deregister, you no longer charge VAT, so the clients will not be able to claim the VAT. There will also be no VAT information on the invoices as you are not a VAT vendor. Now, the problem is where you excluded your 15% on your input costs, your stock, everything else, where you actually claim the 50% back because you're charging 15%. That calculation, output VAT less input VAT, that's how much you owe SARS and all those kind of things. If you had more input VAT, that is, the cost was higher than your sales, and you obviously will have a refund or whatever the case may be, or you've got a lot of zero rated or exempted sales and stuff, and you've got a lot of VAT expenses. Now, once you deregister, you can no longer claim the 15% because you're not a VAT vendor. Now, that will increase your cost by 15%. Realize that. You think you're saving 50%. You're not saving your clients 15%. You're costing yourself 15%. So your cost right there and then went up with 15%. So the 50% you don't charge your clients, well, that's the 15% you lose. So that is the reality of this. Not just that, but you've got to understand that when you deregister for VAT, the indirect tax consequence thereof is that you have to repay SARS the VAT that you claimed on capital expenditure and things. Your stock, your equipment, machinery, vehicles, all those kind of things. We always have those kind of issues when it comes to the registering for VAT, because in SARS, once the VAT that you claimed at that point for the vehicles or commercial properties or whatever else you bought, it's literally, if a person looks at your fixed assets section, your plant, property and equipment, we're talking about that section where you claim these massive refunds, and SARS pays you massive refunds for a single cab bucky, commercial properties, computers and stuff like that. Because remember, with the rule of thumb, any asset below 5,000 Rand is normally written off by most people. Some people go 7.5, but 5,000 is the best kind of point. The rest goes to assets, and that gets written off over a period of time through depreciation or wear and tear. Now, you've got to remember there's also that consequence in your opening and closing stock as well if you deregister, because you're claiming VAT for sales that has not yet taken place. So if you deregister, you've got to pay that VAT back to the receiver of revenue. So that is a problem. That is a big problem, because SARS will use either the original cost value that you claimed, or market value. And that will have to be repaid to SARS, and possibly you have some interest. Now and again, they are a bit crazy, and they charge interest. So a person doesn't want to really go that way. Okay? My advice, if you are VAT registered, remain VAT registered. Unless you've got a services company and you're a one-horse man, one-horse lady, or some cowboy, or someone in a wheelchair, or whatever the case might be. Guys, you provide a service. Obviously, if you're not making more than 2.3 million, then deregister for that. But you've got to really think about what that means for your clients, for your business commercially. I sat today with a client that's got a very small little motor vehicle workshop, in Bedford View, and we sat today because you know what, they're struggling like everybody else. They are struggling because people cannot afford to service their vehicles, have minor and full major services. So people say, listen, you should just change the oil or change the filters, whatever the case may be, and they're struggling. And they said, well, what if we don't have the 15%? And I said to them, the biggest problem is some of your clients are commercial enterprises. So you will lose those clients because they can no longer claim the 15%. And your cost is going to go up by 15% because the 15% you paid on the parts and stuff, you no longer will recover through the 15% you charge. Guys, and that's a terrible misconception that everybody has got, because everybody thinks it's their money and all that. So that's SARS' money, man. That's the VAT on your profit and your non-VAT items that you're paying over to SARS. And it's a very small amount because obviously you've got input VAT and output VAT. Output VAT on sales and income, input VAT on expenses and stocks and all those kind of things, and your assets, mostly your assets. So a person's got to remember that. So guys, it's a pitfall. It is why a lot of people, when they say the 2026 budget, and I'm like, yeah, well, the smoke and mirror budget, where really people were taken for fools, to be honest, because it sounded brilliant. We're no longer going to implement what we did to get additional 2 billion, what, yeah, too long, too short. Guys, if you really look at where we stand, 800 billion out of the budget, about the largest stake out of the budget, you can pretty much say 70% of the bloody budget is income taxes. The second highest, which is 544 or something in that line, guys, that's VAT. Then we start tapering down all the way, state taxes, all those kind of things. So the majority of income for this government comes out of income tax, VAT, and then it comes to the rest of the taxes. So it is a pitfall. Do not fall for it. And trust me, the minister knows people aren't going to deregister. And I can tell you, if there's a 10 or 15% deregistration, it will be a lot. So guys, really, really think about this. If you've got a problem, let me know. As always, I've got your back, and I'll see you in the next session, and everything will be okay.